Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I am so thrilled that today we are joined by Patricia Jackson to talk about her debut novel, Forging a Nightmare.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for coming on.
However, before we start talking about this wonderful book, has anything great happened recently?
Something tremendous happened to me. I used to write Star Wars back in the day, like licensed with Lucasfilm with a gang of folks called West End Games. And the other day I was contacted by a bookbinder who wanted to give me a gift. She wanted to bind all of my stories into a book. And I'm thinking, this is really cool. How much do I owe you? No, nothing. So I received 2 boxes at my job and I opened these boxes and it wasn't just a book. This artist had rendered relics from my Star Wars story. I created a world called Socorro. She had a drinking flask from one of the alcohols made from this planet. She had a tea box that actually had a special brew of tea that will be blue when I brew it.
Wow.
She had notes from the characters to me. She should be a writer herself. She had Beskar as payment because their tourist industry is booming because of me writing about them. So it was a Beskar payment. And then there was this beautiful artwork of the planet with its red sun and its black sand and a traveler moving over the sands. The book had a planetary map. I'm going through it and I'm getting emotional. And my kids are like, Miss, because I was in the classroom and it was lunch and there were a couple kids and the kids were like, Miss Jackson, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, please don't talk to me right now because we were like on the verge of tears. Miss Jackson, are you okay? I'm like, they're happy tears, guys. It really is. It's okay. We just can't talk right now. And when I talk about it, my chest gets tight because the kindness that Marissa L out of LA gave me this week was beyond words. And I am indebted to her forever.
That is so fucking cool. That's incredible.
Can we find pictures of these things?
I'm in the process of taking some pictures and I'm going to post them on my website.
Awesome.
Which will be linked in the episode description, which I usually mention at the end of the episode, but it seems relevant now. Sarah, you can't top that, but you can contribute.
I absolutely cannot top that. No. My good thing is that Mr. Squeak, one of my pugs, has allergies, and I've been trying to get her to the dermatologist, but the dermatologist basically was booked up like 6 months in advance. They said, we're not taking on new clients for another 6 months.
Ugh.
But because and my family has pugs, we've had pugs for like 20 years. We've seen all of the specialty vets in the area, except for the dermatologist until now. But to cut a long, convoluted story short, we knew someone in the office, it turned out, and she was able to get me an appointment earlier. So Mr. Squeak saw the dermatologist, is on some medication for her issues, and it basically like solved her issues in a day.
Oh, good for Mr. Squeak.
I'm so thrilled.
And it pays to be nice to people because they take care.
It does pay to be nice to people. Like, we love everyone in our vet offices. We bring them cookies, like they're great. And you should be nice to them because sometimes then they can get you an appointment. I mean, you should be nice to them anyway.
I was going to tease you for that, but you fixed it.
Yes.
And I mean, with how often the pugs have health issues, they're basically extended family by now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear she's doing better.
Yeah. I mean, she's still has her allergies, but at least she's not as uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled. But that's not nearly as cool as yours, Patty.
My great thing is that Daniel recently traded a bowl of tomatoes from our garden with our neighbors for a bowl of figs from their garden, which is very cool on its own, like part of a community. And like, I don't know, it just felt neat.
Very European.
Yeah, thank you. We don't talk to our neighbors all that much. I'm borderline recluse unless it's a podcast related event. But
I love that in my soul, and I approve that message.
Thank you. But it is nice to just be like connected with the people around you and have little positive interactions. And then he made homemade fig Newtons with those figs. So I've had
nice.
excellent breakfasts this week.
Awesome.
Yeah. Which actually segues perfectly into what I'm drinking today, because he had to zest a lemon. And I was like, well, now we have this poor naked lemon. I guess I have to have a vodka soda for the podcast recording. How about everyone else?
Just the cheery lemonade. It's a little warm in Pennsylvania here today. So just lemonade with a straw.
Oh, that makes it fancy and exciting.
I think we all have a lemon theme going on because I am having a spritzer with homemade limoncello.
Ooh, lovely.
Nice.
And you have an abundance of lemons, so
I have 2 lemon trees and they're very prolific, and I'm just constantly trying to get rid of lemons.
good problems to have.
Yes.
That's a unique problem to have. Cool.
Okay, before we get too off track, though, this is a book podcast, I promise. Has anyone read anything good lately?
I'm not reading right now as far as a book because school just started. Kids came back in. And so what I'm reading is stuff from high school kids from 9th grade to 12th grade. And let me tell you, I think I've seen some new bestsellers. I have a youngster who is writing a very unlikable princess. And we had a conversation about this. I'm like, do you want your protagonist to be unlikable? The child has a plan that the character arc is going to change and the character is going to grow. And generally, you don't get this from kids, which was so wonderful. I have a young thriller writer who had a character walking through an alleyway and they found a body and they're looking at the tattoo on the arm and they get a chill as they push their sleeve up their arm because they have the same tattoo.
You just gave me chills. Oh my God.
I love that.
It was just, so that's what I'm reading. And I have a student teacher who I'm trying to teach him how to bring emerging writers around. And these were all kids that when they started off telling their stories, they were telling, you know, the character is this tall and they're wearing this. And I'm like, can you tell me and show me something that's happening? What are they doing? And they went back with this feedback. And they just came back with these sensational stories. And the challenge of the story is you have to introduce a character in their world in 100 words, no more, no less.
Wow.
Wow.
Really hammering that brevity home.
Yeah, every word matters. And I'm seeing some just tremendous stories. A girl who goes back to her boarding school and it's the anniversary of her brother's murder. And when she goes into her room on her bed, someone's left a picture of her brother.
Oh,
these are high school kids.
That's amazing. And now I want to read all of these. You can't do this to me.
I hope they go on and publish because I want to read this.
Yes.
I haven't read anything, not for the podcast. I mean, I've read Forging a Nightmare by Patricia A. Jackson, but we're going to be talking about that quite a bit, so I'll wait.
Yeah, all of my reading has been podcast reading because we've had a lot of episode recordings in very close succession. So not really time for a lot of personal reading.
You could argue that the whole podcast is personal reading.
I mean, that's true. The podcast is personal reading.
Well, I'll stop teasing you now. But that does bring us to our topic for today, which was what I read, which is Forging a Nightmare. That is still the name of the book. I can do tenses, I promise. Okay, this book definitely sucked me in. I have a lot of things to say. Luckily, we have a spoiler section. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to say half of them. But I think before we jump into this conversation, Patricia, could you give our listeners like an elevator pitch for this book, just to kind of give them an idea of the world that we're going to be talking about?
We have an urban fantasy where Michael Childs is an FBI agent on the trail of a serial killer who has taken people with 12 fingers and toes as their targets. And in order to stop this particular serial killer, Michael has to come to terms with that he also is a potential victim. And in order to stop the killer, he is going to have to saddle up as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
That like abrupt left turn at the end. We'll get into it. Okay. I have to say, I'm not super familiar with like Christianity. A lot of the angel politics was very much over my head, but Michael and him navigating all of the people that he met and sort of dealing with this new world, I felt like I was right there with him, trying to tread water and keep up with everything getting thrown at him constantly. Poor guy deals with a lot in this book.
He really does.
Michael is me. I navigate a world where I'm Black and you don't quite fit in some spaces, but you don't always fit into Black spaces either because you're told you talk too white or you act white, whatever the fuck that is. So I've had to navigate between worlds, and it's lonely, but it's almost preferred than to get the friction on either side or the exhaustion that comes from trying to fit in on either side. And that is Michael. But even though you walk this lonely path, you still have things thrown at you and you're trying to navigate your life as best you can while trying to not upset either side. So it was very near and dear to my heart.
That was something that really struck me about this book. We couldn't figure out how to turn it into a question, but Michael is a Black FBI agent, and that's something that you don't see, I think maybe more often now in pop culture, but having a Black man in a position of authority like this and having that not be necessarily the point of the book, right? He's not constantly being questioned about that aspect of his identity. And that was just so different from a lot of the things that I've seen, you know, in literature and TV shows and stuff. And that's not a question, which is why we didn't write it down, but it was really wonderful.
That's actually really interesting that you say that, because when he was written originally, Michael was white. Anaba is the character that came and she was Black. And the book almost didn't get written because of Anaba. She was such a strong character and she wanted the story to be about her. And I'm like, honey, you kind of got it going on. We need to get him from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And Michael being white just didn't work. And at Anaba's insistence, okay. And part of that came from having been raised in a Christian household and having gone to Catholic schools all my life. Everything that's presented to you is white. Angels are white. Jesus is white. God is white. Well, how the fuck does that work? Who says that? Why does it have to be that way? And I kind of had Michael and his mother, or his mother and Michael's father, in an interracial relationship. Well, why does that have to be? Why can't his father be Black and an angel? So I just decided, oh, we're going there. So this book was an exorcism for me to come to appreciate and love myself at the age of 51 as a Black woman, unapologetically. And if I want to be loud, I'm going to be loud. And if I want to be angry, I'm going to be angry. And that's when Michael popped off the page and Anaba said, yes, now he can have the story and I will help him through.
Oh, I still want a book that centers just on Anaba, though. Can I?
I would read that. I would read the heck out of that.
I agree this is Michael's story, but every time she was on the page, I was like, no more. Please more. You sort of already hit on our next question, but a lot of fantasy and culture in general does default white. And can you talk a little bit about your strategies for helping the reader have the same mental images of these characters that you had going into the book?
I was a little nervous at first because there was a Nigerian book reviewer who, for whatever reason, missed the fact that Michael was Black and had dreadlocks. And it's because she went to the default. So something along the way said dreadlocks, and she went back and she started to read. She goes, how did I miss this? And she said she's so used to fantasy where the characters are just going, you just assume they're going to have blonde hair, fair skin, and blue eyes. There's a section in chapter 1 where it says that he was a Black man in medieval ensemble and he was being looked at. And at one point, the editors wanted to take the Black part out of respect, just out of respect. Oh, no. I want that to be upfront and personal, that he was a Black man dressed in jousting armor walking to a crime scene. And I thought I'd missed the point because too often readers do just default. But I was talking to a friend recently who's a straight, cis, white man. And he said, I kept running into, why are there so many Black people in this story? Not in a bad way. And he felt terrible, that he was saying that. And I said, oh, I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. Because we write too, we exist too, and we need to be seen in our stories and outside of them. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. A lot of the characters are related to Michael, so of course they're all Black. Is that the stupid simplification answer? I don't know.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Of course his family members all look like him. Whoever those family members are, I will not say, because this is the non-spoiler section.
You mentioned the jousting, which was an aspect that I really loved. Like, I loved the horses and I loved the jousting. I feel like you don't see that much in urban fantasy either. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the horses and jousting? Was this written from personal experience or just something that you find cool?
I just love jousting. I love watching jousting and going to the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. I love watching the full contact jousting competitions. I have never done it myself, obviously, because falling off a horse is not my fun. But Maryland, where I live very close to Maryland, their state sport is jousting. They have jousting.
Really?
Yes. And that sort of thing. And I've never done it. I would really love to, but I grew up with horses. I started riding when I was 10, but my mother had a cousin that had horses in Alabama. And every time we would go visit, that's where you would find me with this old farm horse. And then my dad decided I was going to start taking riding lessons when I was 10. I still own 2 horses. I have Maya and I have Indy, both retired because I don't show anymore, but I have evented, I've done dressage, I've done hunter, show jumping, been there, done that. My horse has always been my friend, my confessor, my boyfriend when I didn't want a boyfriend, because you don't want to be betrayed, and your horses are just unconditional.
Horses are better than boyfriends. 100% agreed.
They truly are. And that's what this book was about. What could happen if you could take your horse into a situation where you got punked and your horse take over for you? So that was Anaba. Really? Let me handle this for you. Go rock this for you. So that's where it came from. I love horses. I love their personalities. And that's where it was shining through.
I think that definitely comes through on the page.
Yes.
I was a little terrified of Anaba, but I think that I was supposed to be, because she is worth being.
I think that's kind of the point.
So, yeah. You mentioned earlier, not only does fantasy default white, but so do a lot of depictions of Christian mythology. Can you talk a little bit about the process of diversifying, these stories that a lot of people are at least somewhat familiar with? Not just racially, though, because we also get a lot of other cultures sort of brought into this story.
One of the other reasons I wrote Forging a Nightmare is because a family friend told my mother she wasn't baptized correctly.
Oh.
And that still makes my blood just curdle. My mother had the water sprinkled on her forehead. She wasn't drowned beneath a pulpit. And because of that, she was not baptized correctly. So I'm like, you want me to believe in your ghosts, but you want to convince me that ghosts care if you had water sprinkled on you or if you were drowned in a little bathtub beneath a pulpit. You've got to be kidding me. And I thought, hold my beer. I'm about to break the shit for you. And that's, I almost feel like there's this rebellious nature that comes out in my inner child in the writing that says, I'm going to take this and I'm going to smear this against the wall for you so that you can see. So the Christian God in Forging a Nightmare is in competition with all the other pantheons that have existed. He's just the one that's winning right now. And he's taken all these other pantheons and they are in hell. I won't say how it's used, but you have the head of Kronos that's floating around in hell in other spaces. So yeah, I just decided to just take everything and just throw it in to the mix to show that's basically what has happened. And wherever the Christian God has gone, he has usurped, or people or his believers have usurped the belief systems that were there, oppressed them, suppressed them, and then got rid of them. And then this is what was left and what's currently happening in our country right now, which is kind of crazy. You think about it. And, what did God do about it? Nothing. Quiet, silent.
So do you think someone who's maybe more familiar with Christianity or was raised Christian would get something different out of this book than someone who maybe sees it as a cool story?
People who are Christian have talked to me about it, say that it was like a sigh of relief, that they were glad other faith systems were being recognized, and that also Christianity was not being touted as the be all end all, that it's flawed and that there are problems with it, and that you have a God who really shows himself to be very similar to his creations. You know, we get mad, we destroy things, we utterly destroy things, we punish our subordinates for not doing what we want, we punish our rivals and, you know, place a threat on them. But at the same time, in that system, there is a I won't say a fairness, there is a, you need a little assistance, I'm coming to your aid, I'm coming for you. This wasn't right, I made a mistake, let me try to fix that for you and for some others. So I tried to strike a balance without putting anybody on a pedestal.
Absolutely.
You kind of talked a little bit about how you have this extensive experience writing for Star Wars. What was it like writing original characters in the same story as like these established mythological religious characters? Like, did you have to change any of your approach or?
I love Star Wars, but the last thing I wanted to do was to go play with any of the canon stuff. I was not interested. My philosophy is that when the Death Star blew up, somebody was burying their spouse of 50 years. Somebody was having a baby in the midst of some crisis. Those are the stories. Those are the stories. So I actually invented a world called Socorro because I didn't know where all the Black people were in Star Wars. So I just made my own planet.
There you go.
And that's where I was. I was doing all that stuff. And what was interesting is an edict came down from Lucasfilm stating that we little people were not allowed to write about the canon. And I was like, why do I? I'm over here going pirates, having a good idea. But then a character popped into my head and he was a Jedi. And I'm like, dude, I'm not allowed to write about you. And he was like, oh, no. You will tell my story. And I was writing a story, couldn't finish it until this character got his way. And the name of the character is Adolric Brandel. And the story became known as The Final Exit. So I wrote the story knowing it was naughty and sent it to the editor at West End Games. And he called me. He was like, you know, you're not supposed to do this. And I'm kind of like, yeah. And he goes, but it's a really cool story. I'm going to send it to Lucasfilm. So maybe 4 or 5 days later, George Lucas's assistant put the stamp of approval on the story with a caveat. If Patty wants to write about Jedi or whatever, she has that say. She can do that. And I went right back to writing about Black pirates on Socorro. So when I say I write Star Wars and people are not Star Wars fans, you know, I'd love to read your stuff, but I'm not a Star Wars fan. I write stories in a Star Wars framework.
In the universe.
Yes, I tell people's stories. So that's why you don't have to know everything about Christianity or everything about Norse Christianity when you read Forging a Nightmare, because I'm just telling the story about a guy who's trying to adjust to who he really is. And he's kind of knocked on his ass because of it and has to rely on strangers around him to give him a hand up and a leg up on what's going on. So ultimately, that is just the story of him finding himself with all this other crazy stuff going on. And at the same time, you're not stuck with the Christianity because somewhere in there, I'm going to break that shit.
Yeah. We're getting close to the spoiler section, which is good because I'm like, there are things I can't say yet. If you could choose one element of your world building that could exist in the real world, what would it be? Hell. Really?
I like how you didn't have to think about that at all.
You have to think about it. If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be writing urban fantasy, I would have laughed at you all the way because I'm a fantasy person. And it's so funny because I'm writing fantasy right now and I'm struggling, but I loved my real world elements where you're in New York, you're doing whatever, but I was never happier than when I got to the sections in hell, because that's where the fantasy got to ring true. And so many people have written to me and said, is there real estate available? Because we are in. And I just giggle. I'm like, is that a good thing, Patty? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing that people want to live in hell? But yes, hell, because I wanted to change that landscape because I don't see Lucifer necessarily as an antagonist of God, just another rival. Just another rival who was punished by being put into this space. So while it's a deadly space, you have to be careful while you're living there. There's a beauty that exists among the danger.
Isn't that okay? I'm trying to pull on the like lit class I took in college where we read Genesis. Isn't there some origin in that it used to just be a twofold God, like a long ass time ago, and it was, God and Lucifer, but then as the culture changed, one of them had to win, and so it no longer became the two-sided God and became just the God, and so Lucifer became the rival because of that. I am probably pulling this entirely out of my ass.
No, because there's so much to the Christian mythology. I say Christian mythology, people get mad, and then I'm like, you're someone I don't want to talk to anymore.
Yeah.
There's a Christian mythology because, some people believe that Eve was not the first woman, that it was Lilith. There's a whole story behind that as well. So there are so many elements to it. That's why when people want to come and like beat their hammer and say it's this way, I'm looking at them going, you're someone I don't want to talk to. Bye. Check, please.
How many times was that translated?
Exactly. Yeah. Who did the translations? I just absolutely giggle. And you can have your faith, but please understand that your faith has been translated a lot of times, and mistakes have been made, and other people are allowed to be in the space with you. And when you try to deny someone being in that space, again, you're someone I don't want to know. I have friends who are witches. I have friends who are Satanists, Norse pagans, and I love them all. And they teach me so much. Yeah, I absolutely just love it.
Okay, we have to go to spoilers because I have so many questions. But before we do, Sarah, why should you read this book?
You should read this book if you really enjoyed the TV show Supernatural, but you wanted it to be more diverse and have a lot more horses and a lot less fridging of the love interests.
Yes. Oh man, if you're into Christian mythology or horses, you will fucking love this book.
Yes.
To avoid spoilers, skip to 5422. And now we can talk about whatever we want.
Cool.
Yeah, this book really did remind me of Supernatural, but better.
Yeah.
And I loved Supernatural. It got a little odd towards the end and I sort of fell off. But I loved Supernatural, and a lot of the elements that I saw in the show, I did put here in some cases, or twisted or changed. A lot of the elements, everything a writer sees becomes fodder for their world.
It's like that magpie instinct.
Yes, absolutely.
So Anaba,
Anaba.
I'm sorry. Miri does call her Anna at one point, I think. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. Oh, Miri and Anaba were fantastic.
That actually is Tomashek for mother.
Really?
Yes.
I missed that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I loved them. Their relationship was so like sweet and a little bit heartbreaking, mostly just because of the shit they were dealing with. Oh, that was not my question. I got distracted. I'm sorry. I really loved them.
I also really enjoyed how Ziri goes off with Lucifer and his nightmare riders. I forget what they were called.
The Black Sea.
Yes. At the very end. Like, are we going to get a book about Ziri and his adventures?
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about it. I'm sitting on a work in progress that I'm waiting to hear about. And I'm sad because I haven't heard for a year. It's called The Nightmare Hitman. Mm-hmm. And it is a different cast, but it's set in the same universe. And you have a male nightmare. So I wanted to walk away from a sequel because I wasn't told or asked to do a sequel. Mm-hmm. But there are 2 books that would follow Forging a Nightmare with Michael and Anaba. And in the 3rd book, their daughter.
Ooh.
You can't just say that.
And I'll say this about their daughter. She can summon all of their weapons and the nightmares.
Oh, okay.
I need it.
I'll just sit here waiting for however long it takes now.
I need this in my life, please.
And Ziri features very prominently in the second book. He comes back.
Good. I love Ziri. Everything he did.
Yeah, I really liked him too. I mean, I liked everyone, but I particularly liked him.
There were some moments when he frustrated me, but just like he was doing young kid stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like
young guy stuff. That's fine.
He's a young guy, so it makes sense that I wouldn't necessarily agree with everything he does.
Again, my question was supposed to be about Anaba.
I'm sorry, we got sidetracked.
So the concept of free will comes up a lot in this book. And how did you balance that with characters like Anaba, who's just sort of constantly manipulated by the characters around her?
Anaba is a sliver of me as well. I think almost every character has a splinter of the author who created them. And I am given to duty. Even sometimes when duty takes you in the direction that you don't want to go morally in some cases. Anaba paid a debt. And even though she was cheated in some way, she was looking to do the best she could to fulfill and make good on that debt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a short and sweet simple answer. Because I am the same. I will not want to do something, but because of a debt that I feel I owe to the person asking me, I will kill myself trying to do it. It will get done because it has to.
Her sense of duty was incredible. And it's partially wrapped up in her identity as a Marine. And she's, so devoted to the things that she has decided are worth her time. Like I said, anytime she was on the page, she stole the show. I'm sorry. I loved Michael, but Anaba still stole the show.
Awesome.
You mentioned that you had actually changed some pretty major aspects of Michael while you were in the process of writing this. How different is the final product from the first draft?
Michael is very different. If you said that you had a white guy that was an FBI agent who had a degree in medieval studies, who's going to blink at that?
Yeah.
But now you have a black guy who jousts and rides horses and has a degree in medieval studies and is a champion sword fighter. That makes that exotic, which is kind of sad, but it makes it exotic. And the character had to sit up and have a little more presence to own that. And then to go a step farther, his mother is an expert in these particular things, and she's a black woman. So that just changes the dynamic everywhere. And the character has to carry himself just a little bit differently, because even if he's not questioned outright, someone's going to think in their head, do black folks do that?
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a question, but I thought Sarah was so cool. Like with her expertise and her archaeology, I was like, you are awesome. I love you.
She is an amazing mom. My mom, there's a lot of my mom in her. So yeah, thank you for saying that. She's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was really sad when she died. That was a big bummer for me.
Oh, I had kids coming in, bum rushing my classroom going, you didn't say I needed tissues. Why did you do that?
Oh, am I just like a strange, heartless person? I thought it was kind of sweet that she was finally going to be reunited with her husband.
There is something to that too, because part where she just says she's just tired, that came from my dad. My dad had a lot of illnesses at the end of his life. And one of the last things I remember him saying to me is, I'm just so tired.
Mm-hmm.
And so his death, while we were really, really sad about it, obviously, it was a mercy. It was a release.
And not to trivialize that with the book, but Michael can kind of go to the afterlife. So she's not even really gone. I don't know. To me, like that.
He can take a trip. Anaba, find the road.
Yeah. That's like a weekend trip to see your parents. That's what I do. We all wish we could see our parents every day. I guess Sarah lives closer to her parents than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I see my parents on a very regular basis. So
cool.
Yeah, but Yeah, like it didn't feel like she was really leaving. So it was sad, but I was like,
For me, what really made me sad was the manner in which it happened more than the fact that it happened at all. Because like you said, Lily, like now she gets to spend time with her husband and she's tired and kind of done with things and wants to move on, which I respect. But it didn't have to be so violent.
That's true. She shouldn't have had to suffer. That does suck.
Bad guys are awful. They're terrible people.
Breaking news at 11.
Your bad guys were very awful.
Oh.
Which I say that in a good way. That's a good thing.
No, thank you. Thank you. Because that's what I'm struggling with right now. My bad guys are not talking to me in this epic fantasy I'm working on. And I'm like, guys, you need to be terrible like these guys over here. They just have no personality yet. So that's all right. We need to daydream some more.
Mm-hmm. Well, you really blurred the line between good and evil in this book, or at least canon good and evil, right?
Yes.
Like we had the Grigori who were technically following God's decree as the bad guys. Were there any challenges with keeping Michael as the good guy while he's kind of technically in league with Lucifer and going against God?
No, not really, because the Grigori were really a contrast to Anaba. Because their sense of duty is tarnished because now it has become pride. And for Anaba, it's not pride. It's not about her. It's about protecting the people that are around her. And Lucifer, while technically he's God's rival, there's sort of been a truce because they don't want to go to war because they don't know what that will look like. It's been devastating before, kind of like a third world war, what will happen. But you have people that are trying to trigger these things and make it happen. So in a sense, God made a mistake with the Nephilim saying, I want them eradicated. Oops. I'm like,
yeah.
So cut them a little bit of slack. So Lucifer's looking for allies. God is looking for allies. And Michael wants to look out for the Nephilim. He doesn't care about God.
I love that Anaba needed an entire branch of people to be her foil. That's how great she is. Not just one person. No.
When I think of her, my favorite moment with her, there are so many favorite moments with her, but I love the one where she's in nightmare form and she's drinking out of the baptismal font.
Yes.
And it's so disrespectful on all levels. And she meant all of it. She would have yes. What can I get away with? I'm bored at this moment. Love her so much.
She is fantastic. So I can't help but think that with the Grigori being so entrenched in the FBI and with Kame Sear in the CIA, were they getting up to any other mischief besides just taking out the Nephilim?
Definitely other stuff. Definitely infiltrating themselves in other projects and other things. Influencing, very much like the Pope influenced politics in the medieval time. Mm-hmm. They were also influencing politics and all kinds of missions. Oh yes, definitely. There's another nightmare book that I would love to write where it's the Civil War. It's an alternate history where the South actually wins, and they win as a result of fallen angels interfering in the military. So I would like to write that, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm brave enough to go to the antebellum South. We'll have to see. Yeah, because that's going to be scary.
Yeah. I'm not brave enough, but I got a lot less going on.
Yeah.
But that sounds like an absolutely fascinating book, and I would love to read it. So for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Out of curiosity, how much do you plan when you write a novel?
I am a horrible panther and I love it. I will never change. I do write notes down because sometimes my inner 8-year-old comes out and shows me a scene or says something and it's so wonderful. So you have to jot it down on your phone or scribble it down on an index card. And then I stash these things. And it's kind of like getting all your ingredients for a good chili. And when the chili is ready, then you start making it and you start putting all the ingredients together. So I don't plan. And that's what gets me in trouble with word counts. Oh, I'm terrible. I'm terrible with word counts. Forging a Nightmare was 150,000 words. And my agent, Sarah Megabo, said, Patty, you're going to boot camp. Get rid of 30,000 words. So it took me two months to do it. then it went off to the editor, and the editor was like, something's missing. And I'm like, oh my God, don't tell me. So I'm putting things back, and I'm doing this cautiously. And Rose Green was the first editor for the book. And she was like, Patty, don't worry about word count. I got your back. Just put it in. So I guess the book ended up being about 136,000 words. And I get teased whenever Angry Robot has pictures of the books because it's the fat kid. And I'm okay being the fat kid, but it's so obvious sometimes. But yeah, I get myself in so much trouble because my inner 8-year-old knows how to tell a really good story. And when I say that the Nightmare Hitman, I don't want to say puts the Forging a Nightmare to shame, but the story is so rich. The mythology is so rich. Hell comes into even more prominence, and you don't have any of those main players. No one from Forging a Nightmare makes an appearance in the next book. It is all their book, but you have another fallen angel. You have a really bad fallen angel. You have all this mythology. Yeah. And then I keep seeing stories. And I'm like, how can I incorporate that into the story? I'm like, okay, you're at 150,000 words. Knock it off. Yourself down. And I even said to my agent, I'm like, the word count, Sarah, is crazy. Patty, don't worry about that. Don't say that out loud to me. Please don't say that. So I get myself in trouble, but I don't care because the Panther can tell a really great story.
You said that, for example, Anaba dug her heels in until Michael was black. Were there any other scenes that surprised you, or like anything that's come up as you're pantsing that have surprised you about writing this book?
There's something that made me really sad. Ziri was not the character in the original book. It was a Lakota boy named Weya. And in an age of appropriation and in trying to be respectful, I am not Indigenous. I have like maybe 1% according to Ancestry. So I was asked to remove that character. And I was very sad because I had done a lot of research. I had spoken to some people that said, oh, Patty, this is a good representation. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for including us. And so I went from Weya to Ziri, who was Tuareg from Mali. And it seemed almost alien to me because I know nothing about the Tuareg people. I know nothing about my own African roots and really struggled, particularly with the language of Tamashek. And I had to find people who spoke the language, and that was a small nightmare. And I ran into 8 professors, and I was like, my gosh, can you help me? And the gentleman who did help me, he said, but I speak Tamashek with a Dutch accent. Please help me to make sure that this is correct. And he did, and it was wonderful. And I love Ziri, but I had such a deeper and closer connection to Weya. And if I had a language question, there was no issue. I could easily find someone who spoke the language, whereas it was difficult and not really knowing some of the deep rooted traditions of the Tuareg without being a tourist, so to speak. But I think I found a way to bring Weya back, if only momentarily, in a book to pay him homage because he was an amazing character.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. I get it, but that does suck still.
Yes.
This is not episode related, but have you seen Prey? Sarah, you haven't because you don't watch movies.
I haven't, yeah.
Loved it.
So
Loved
good.
It. And I may actually try to find the version where it's all in Comanche.
They have it on Hulu. It's one of the language options.
Is it in Comanche? There's one where it's all in Comanche. All of it's Comanche. And well, I'll have to see if I can just change the settings. I looked at the settings.
Oh, was it not?
No.
I thought there was. Okay.
I have chills now because I loved that so, and I was sad. It made me even sadder about Weya. I loved Prey. That was beautiful in words I can't even describe. And Amber Mid-Thunder, I think that's her name. What a beautiful young lady. Just so well done on so many different levels. Confession, I don't know anything about Comanche culture. So halfway through the movie, I had to Google, did they do a good job? Because I was like, I don't know. And it sounds like they did. So that's wonderful. Yes.
The movie was so good. Someone coming at it from the, I'm a big Alien Predator fan.
Yes, same.
So it's great on that level. We were watching the credits and I was like, oh, and there's a language consultant. And there's a language consultant. I'm sorry, that was a distraction, but.
No, that was a great distraction.
So you've talked a little bit about sequels, but now is our time to submit a request. The relationship and the dynamics between Michael and Lucifer, and Lucifer's gang, Lokiel, thank you, and just like that whole political ambiance was so fascinating and multifaceted and just so interesting to read about. Can we get more of that?
I would like more. Please and thank you.
I would, like I said, I haven't thought too clearly on what the premise of the second novel would be, but there are whole scenes, and it's, of course, Michael and Anaba. Lucifer centers directly in what is going on. So do the Black Seraphim. Lokiel comes back. The Horsemen come back. EJ comes back. Wea does come back. Ziri comes back. And it's really interesting because you're going to have some aspects where we leave hell and go to purgatory.
Ooh.
And there's a reason. And Anaba and Michael get separated. And I'm just waiting for someone to say, an editor or a publishing house to say, we would like to see what comes next for Forging a Nightmare, because I would desperately love to tell that story. Desperately love to tell that story.
It sounds like there are so many stories set within this like literary universe that, man, I really want to read them.
And it's the mythology is just so much fun. And taking the mythology that exists and twisting it a little bit is a lot of fun. Someone said to me, where does real mythology start and you begin or take over from there? And I said, sometimes I forget. Like, for instance, where the four horsemen came from. Basically, I just decided that there were 5 angels that were guarding the Garden of Eden when Lucifer had his thing with Adam and Eve. And as a punishment, God said, you will become the afflictions against mankind. You will become the horsemen that bring them all this strife. And you will have to guard a ruin. And the first mission was, you will destroy Eden. That was solidly me, because my inner 8-year-old had to figure out, well, where did the 4 horsemen come from? I wanted them to be angels who were not necessarily in bad standing, but were not necessarily in the best standing. You don't want to be one of the 4 horsemen because you are somewhere lost in between, like Michael. So even though Michael could go to heaven and visit mom, it's going to cause a stir.
Right.
He goes there because he's a horseman and he needs Anaba to get there.
Oh, I did have to text Sarah a couple of times, like, is this the book? Or is this a thing? I don't know.
I don't know why you're texting me. It's not like I have that much of a deeper understanding.
Well, you asked your mom and she had an answer. I wasn't wrong.
That's true.
You had such cool gray areas to play in this world. Yeah. I'm so excited to see more.
What was your reaction when you found out that it was Mikael that had forged Anaba?
I was a little horrified, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I gotta say, I didn't think he came off great in this book. Well, a lot of what we know about him is Michael being very upset. And then we get a reason for Anaba to also be very upset. Like, my 2 favorite characters don't like you. I'm not going to be super inclined to be very sympathetic either.
I love it. I love it.
Man, Anaba gets such the, like, shit end of the stick all the time. That poor thing. She does not want a hug from me, but that's all I wanted to do.
I love the ball scene when they finally sort of came together and he understood her. There was some pushing back with, why would Michael, he sort of assaulted her, when he pushed her against the tree, but he's angry. He's wanted answers for a long time. And she shows up and she's met the father and she doesn't see anything and he's angry. So I thought that he is going to be like that, because then he's going to have to ask for her forgiveness and she's not necessarily going to give it.
Oh, I thought Michael handled, like, admitting that he doesn't deserve it yet, but he is intending to work towards her forgiveness. That whole interaction I thought was just so very well done, because that's not something you can just say, sorry.
And I also really liked that, like, he acknowledged that, because I feel like you don't necessarily see protagonists in fantasy novels acknowledging when they do need forgiveness, but they don't necessarily deserve it.
Right.
Like normally, a lot of the time, it's just like a yes, you're forgiven.
Yeah.
And so I liked that was not.
And then it's good if we keep going through it. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
But Anaba would never let that slide.
No. Anaba was the greatest. She would not let that slide.
Was there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to bring up or discuss? Or
I don't think so, other than just loving characters, whether you're the reader or you are the writer. It just comes through. And I'm just, thank you for sharing with me. It makes my inner 8-year-old very happy that you see what we saw in these characters, and you saw even more, and even in secondary characters. Though I do have to ask, I asked someone who their favorite character was, and they said EJ. What did you think of Sir EJ?
I loved EJ. I did want to see more of him.
yeah, I never say this. Like the record can show that I usually have the opposite stance. I feel like this book should have been a trilogy. I think the characters needed more space.
Yeah.
I think what I saw of EJ I really liked. And knowing that you had to cut it down, I think makes a lot of sense, just sort of given my experience with the story. I think they needed more room to breathe. Usually I am the opposite. I'm like, why is this so many books? This could have been 100 pages. What's wrong with the author?
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and I think EJ is definitely one of those characters that could have benefited a lot from just having more time. Like, I didn't get to hang out with him enough.
To be jumped by pestilence.
Yeah. Which we all would have enjoyed immensely. When you do the erotica spin-off, I'm there. I loved Wormwood. Speaking of pestilence.
Oh, yes. Who is your favorite horseman?
I feel like Wormwood was the one that we got the most.
We see a lot of Samuel, but Anaba doesn't like him, and therefore I don't like him.
Yeah, I was gonna say Wormwood gets the most positive screen time, and I really did enjoy her relationship with EJ. So I think that Wormwood would have to be my favorite horseman.
Cool, very cool. And you understand why Samuel and Anaba don't get along because Mike keeps messing up and dying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Samuel is like, hey, there's rules. And Anaba is like, not for me.
Man down, Marine coming in. Let's go.
I loved their antagonistic relationship. I thought that was like a really fascinating element. Because Samuel is one of the good guys.
Yeah.
But there's still tension there. And so having that sort of extra element of conflict between Anaba and Samuel made the scenes with the horsemen in hell so much more interesting. And like there was so much more dimension there. But it did mean that he was not my favorite horseman.
Lily does not play. If my protagonist does not like, it's over. I don't care. It's over. I like the way she thinks.
Lily has strong feelings.
But thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This book was so much fun. It makes me wish I knew anything about Christianity, and I would never say that. Also never say that ever. So I guess, my angle coming at the stories in this book, or the canon that this book plays with very deeply, is from a very literary perspective. I read Dante's Inferno. And so having like a version of hell to compare and contrast with your version of hell was super cool.
I teach the Inferno. So the book, Alighieri's book, heavily influenced Forging Nightmare. And when I was thinking about the different levels, I didn't want it to be levels per se, but different areas that you might go to. They might talk about Circle 8 or Circle 9, that kind of thing. But what was interesting is I didn't know what to do about the vestibule road. And that's where the mythology of the nightmares grew out, that it's this road actually, and it's for waiting souls that keep waiting because you are unclassified. You're not going any particular place. And so you can't have turns on the road, obviously. But the nightmare can see various places and can port from place to place or get into our world from the vestibule road. So that contributed to the lore of the nightmare, which was cool.
Yes. I love that refrain of find me a road, I think.
Yep. Find the road.
Every time someone said that, I was like, oh, shit's going down. I think now is when we switch to our Pet Peeve Corner, which is actually our extremely justified anger corner for the first time in maybe ever. First time in podcast history.
I think it's the first time in our podcast history that this has been justified anger.
I have recently come under fire by some people in our district community because I use kids' preferred pronouns. I am a fierce advocate of LGBTQ rights, particularly when it comes to kids, because you have kids that are unaliving themselves just because they're different. And the difference is nobody's business. Okay. And you let people be people. One of these people in the community have labeled me as a groomer because I use kids' preferred pronouns, and they are coming after my club at the high school. My club is called The Beautiful People, and there's a history to this name. I have always enjoyed the company of LGBTQ people, preferring it in some cases, even being a straight cis woman. They're just real. They're my people. And I always refer to my friends as the beautiful people. And whenever I refer to my kids, I would refer to them as the beautiful people. And they took a vote that they wanted to change the Gay Straight Alliance Club to this name, the Beautiful People. And it's a wonderful club. It is a student-run club where children can find sanctuary among their own, and they can have conversations, fierce conversations, educational conversations. I learned a lot about trans surgery and how that works and the meds that some kids are on. And the most important part is they tell their stories. And to think that that threatens some grown-ass white woman out there, that these children are telling their stories, just says to me, you have a problem. You have the problem. The children in the community don't have the problem. You have the problem. And the fact that you feel that you need to erase this community and also erase BIPOC people because you feel uncomfortable, maybe you're the one that needs to go to the kill shelter and be eliminated because you're the problem. I get a little passionate about it, ladies.
As you should.
Understandably so.
There's something deeply ironic and horrifying that empowering young adults, children, is being labeled as grooming when that's actually, my understanding, the exact opposite.
Yes.
Is that when young people feel like they're in control, they're so much less likely to be taken advantage of. Like, that's literally the opposite of how it works.
And when you have children who feel that they are unnatural or that their urges are wrong, no, we can't have that. Love is love. Love is not gender, period. And to think that there are people in the community who have children, somehow that happened, who have children who want to go on the attack. And it's not just LGBTQ children. It's not just BIPOC children. It's children with special needs. You know, they're this circle of this coven, maybe I shouldn't even call them a coven, this cabal of women. They also want autistic children to not be in regular education. How dare you? How dare you try to label or to segregate children because they don't fit your bill of what normal is? How dare you? And I will go down swinging for my children. So that's my pet peeve. People who have an issue with someone who's just different than them. Yeah, not having it. I will protect my children to the end.
Justified anger, not pet peeve.
I was going to say my only problem is that a pet peeve is something that it's like, it's just a thing that bothers you because you're quirky. And that's like actually a really big problem that affects a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that your kids are going through this, and I'm sorry that you're being targeted. That's horrible.
I had some trans writers coming because I believe in representation. So I have Black writers come, women writers, openly gay men, and I wanted some trans writers because I had a crew boys, 3 trans boys, and I wanted them to see themselves represented. And I got questioned and I was livid because in my classroom, writing is healing. I want you to write about the things that bother you and get the poisons out onto the page if necessary. And Al Hess from Angry Robot, whose book I just dropped, Al Hess came to talk.
I think his book is coming out in February. I think it's coming out on Valentine's Day, 2023.
That is awesome.
Yes.
But one of my trans boys asked Al a question. How did your identity feature into any of your writing. And Al said, and I'll never forget this, and I'm about to give you chills again because I have chills now. Al said that at some point he had just given up and life just didn't matter to him because of how society was treating him. So he gave all of that emotion to his characters, but he gave the characters something that he himself did not have: hope. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop anyway, but you felt every soul in the room quiver at saying that. And I tell that story over and over and over again because it's such an important lesson.
Absolutely.
This is exactly what people mean when they say representation matters. Like, young people have to see themselves.
They have to see. And, you know, it was funny because it all happened by accident. I remember having Leslie Penelope come in to talk to the kids. And I noticed the Black kids sitting up. I saw Black kids and I thought, oh, okay. All right. So then I had Katie Edwards come in and talk to the kids. He does the tarot sequence. I had one gay boy that I knew that he was gay, and I just saw him lean forward and I thought, oh, okay, this is real. And you need to pay attention and make sure you bring a representation of people coming into this classroom so the kids see themselves, which is really nice.
Your kids are so lucky to have you, I just have to say.
I feel this is my Anaba moment. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because in the worst of it, I was driving home and I had told myself in the beginning of this, because it started with a book ban where they banned all these books about BIPOC people, LGBTQ people. And I wasn't going to stick my nose out from beneath the rock because I knew the backlash that was coming. But I had a friend who had another club called the Panther Anti-Racist Union, and I knew they would come for him. And I knew they would come for the children. And I needed to be there to prevent that from happening. And I didn't know when it would hit, but it finally has hit where my safety and my job, you know, I'm concerned there's an issue that by doing the right thing, I've put myself, you know, out there. And one day I was driving home and Anaba whispered in my ear, "What has this cost you? Blood, sweat, tears? Then surrender is not an option." Yes, Anaba. That's all you do is you bow your head to that. Yes, Anaba. We're going to put that in your next book. We're going to put that in your next book. But I hear you. So surrender is not an option for my children.
Is there anything that random ass person from the other coast can do for situations like this? Is there like an anti-banned books coalition that someone could donate to or anything like that that you know of? I know I just put you on the spot.
I can actually send you to the website for the Panther Anti-Racist Union where donations can be accepted there. And how that is used is buying T-shirts for the books for the kids, I should say, buying T-shirts for the kids, buying books for the kids, and helping them to use their advocacy we're shifting a little bit because we were one of the very few in the country that was able to fight off our book ban. It was reversed. So the kids are kind of shifting into women's reproductive rights, gun advocacy, gun violence. So they're shifting, but it's just about teaching the children that they have a voice. You don't have a voice at 18. You have a voice as soon as your lungs can scream. And it's just teaching them to feel safe enough to tell their stories because that's where the power is. That's where the power is. Because when that angle wasn't working for them, they shifted to attacking the LGBTQ community, and the kids came at them and told their stories and shamed them again. But there are still elements in the community that are pushing back because of their absolute horrid ignorance and just their general vile meanness. So that's one aspect that can be done. And I will send that link to you.
And we'll include that link in our show notes as well. So for any listeners who want to go and donate, you know, if you just go to the episode description, that link will be there. Patty, thank you so much for coming on. This has been absolutely wonderful. Could you tell us, you've talked a little bit about some of your planned sequels. Is there anything you can tell us about current projects you're working on? You mentioned you have a fantasy book that's kind of giving you problems.
Well, the work in progress that was just finished is a nightmare book. It is called The Nightmare Hitman. And I'm just hoping that I get the call and the nod to say, yes, we're going to go through with it. The story is near and dear to my heart. As Forging a Nightmare was my exorcism, this book is sort of my father's exorcism. when he grew up in Alabama and was almost lynched a couple of times. So it really talks about the perspective of Black people and how they were treated. Another Black cast, a wonderful nightmare, a fantastic fallen angel, and more mythology and lots more of hell.
I'm so excited.
Which is just so awesome. And just more of the mythology, of the Christian mythology broken and given that special treatment by me. But basically what you have is you have a nightmare who is working for a fallen angel who happens to be a Gorgon. She's a sister of Medusa.
Oh, I'm in. I'm so in.
And their relationship has grown stale, and he's looking for something different. And one night he happens to run into a hotshot lawyer named Selma Williams, and she's trying to find out who murdered her parents 20 years ago. But some of her answers lie in a place that she can't get to. Hell.
I love the way that you work like some of the classic detective tropes in with these really cool, like larger mythologies. I'm so excited.
Yes.
And this one, you're going to love this. There is a cat named Ichabod. That's not what he appears to be.
I cut the cat question because it felt mean. You got horses and you got dogs. Where's the cats? Now I know. It's in the next book. You got me. I should have known. You were already there.
And so last question, where can you be found on the internet for listeners who want to go out and buy your book and follow you on all the social media?
You can find me at bybirthright.com. That is my author website. You can also find me on Twitter at Tristan. That is Treistan. And on my website, you can find all my other social media. I've sort of been hiding on social media a little bit because of all the haters that are, after me because, well, I believe that people should be allowed to be people. So, but if people interact and send me messages, I definitely respond back.
Awesome. And all of those will be linked in the show notes for this episode. So you can just click on the link below to go to any of those places. Thank you again so much for coming to hang out for a little bit. This was so much fun.
Oh, this was awesome. This
has been wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We are on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.